My husband looked me in the eyes and said, "I am in love with your sister. And it has been going on for 5 years." I did not cry. I did not raise my voice. I did not even ask why. I smiled. Then I picked up my phone and sent her 3 words. "I have proof." Later, he told me her face went completely pale when she read it. Good. That was the point. Because what they thought was a secret love story was about to become something else entirely. If you think you know how this story ends, you do not. Stay with me. My name is Claire Bennett. I am 37 years old, and until recently I believed I had a life that was steady, predictable, and real in all the ways that matter. My husband, Ethan, and I lived in a quiet neighborhood just outside Austin, Texas. The kind of place where the lawns were always trimmed, where neighbors waved but did not ask too many questions, where life moved at a comfortable pace. We had been married for 11 years. Not the kind of marriage people post about online, not dramatic or flashy, but lived in. Comfortable. Ours. Friday nights meant takeout and a bottle of red wine. Sometimes we would sit on the couch with our dog Milo stretched between us, half watching a show and half talking about things that did not seem important at the time but somehow were. Work frustrations. Weekend plans. Small jokes that only made sense to us. We shared everything. A joint bank account. A calendar. Passwords. The quiet assumption that nothing between us needed to be hidden. My younger sister, Lily Carter, lived about 40 minutes away in a small apartment downtown. She was 2 years younger than me, louder, sharper, the kind of person who filled a room without trying. Growing up, we were not always close. There was competition, the kind sisters rarely admit out loud. But as adults, we had found our way back to each other. Slowly, carefully, like something rebuilt instead of inherited. Sunday brunch had become our thing. A standing tradition. No matter how busy life got, we would meet, order too much food, and talk for hours. Sometimes about nothing. Sometimes about everything. Ethan fit into that world easily. He and Lily got along well. They laughed at the same kind of jokes. They could carry conversations without me, which I used to see as a good sign. Proof that my life made sense as a whole. I remember thinking more than once how lucky I was that the 2 most important people in my life could sit at the same table without tension. That everything felt aligned. That nothing was out of place. The first crack was small enough that I almost ignored it. It was a Tuesday evening in early October. I came home earlier than usual because a meeting had been canceled. The house was quiet, except for Ethan's voice coming from the kitchen. It was softer than usual. Warmer. The kind of tone people use when they think no one else is listening. I paused in the hallway, not because I was suspicious, but because something about it felt unfamiliar. At first, I assumed he was talking to a client or maybe his brother. I set my bag down and started sorting through the mail, only half paying attention. Then he laughed. It was a quiet laugh, almost private, the kind I had not heard in a long time. Not directed at me. I walked into the kitchen. He had his back to me, phone pressed to his ear. When he heard my footsteps, he turned quickly. For a split second, something passed across his face. Not guilt. Not yet. Just a flicker of adjustment, like he was deciding how to present himself. Then he smiled. "You are home early," he said. "It is Lily. She says hi." He handed me the phone without hesitation. Lily did say hi. Her voice sounded normal. Light. Casual. We talked for a minute or two about nothing important. Weekend plans. A new restaurant she wanted to try. Everything sounded exactly the way it always had. And yet, standing there in my own kitchen, I felt something shift. Like the furniture in a familiar room had been moved just slightly. Not enough to notice immediately, but enough that you could feel it if you stood still. I told myself it was nothing. I told myself that for weeks. But after that day, I started noticing things I could not unsee. Ethan began keeping his phone face down on the table. He took it with him everywhere, even into the bathroom. He started charging it in his office, instead of beside the bed. Lily canceled brunch more often, always with reasonable excuses. Work, a cold, a friend in town. Individually, none of it meant anything. Together, it began to form a pattern I did not want to name. The night everything became undeniable was a Saturday in December. Ethan had been distant all week. Not cold, not unkind, just careful. Like someone measuring every word before saying it. After dinner, he sat across from me at the kitchen table. His hands were folded in front of him, his posture too straight, too deliberate. That was the moment I knew. Not what he was about to say, not yet. But I knew something was coming that would change everything. "Claire," he said quietly, "there is something I need to tell you." The house felt unusually still. The refrigerator hummed in the background. Milo was asleep under the table, his body warm against my feet. I held my wine glass but did not drink. "I am in love with Lily," he said. He paused like he was giving me time to process it. "We have been together for 5 years. 5 years." The words did not hit all at once. They unfolded slowly, like something being translated in real time. 5 years meant birthdays, holidays, vacations, Sunday brunches where the three of us sat together, talking, laughing, sharing meals while something else existed underneath it all. 5 years meant there had never been a version of my marriage that was what I thought it was. I expected to feel something explosive. Anger, shock, grief. But what came instead was something quieter. Clarity. Like a puzzle I had been working on without realizing it had suddenly completed itself. I looked at him for a long moment. Really looked at him. Then I smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was not forgiveness. It was recognition. I reached for my phone, opened my messages, and scrolled to Lily's name. I typed 3 words. "I have proof." I pressed send. Then I set my phone face down on the table. Ethan watched me, confused, maybe even unsettled. I do not think he had prepared for that reaction. I stood up, walked past him, and went upstairs to the bedroom. He did not follow. Later I heard the guest room door close. That night I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the silence of a house that no longer felt like mine. I did not cry. Not because it did not hurt, but because somewhere between the moment he spoke and the moment I walked away, something inside me had already shifted. This was not the end of my life. It was the beginning of something else. I did not sleep that night. Not really. I lay on my side of the bed, staring into the dark, replaying everything with a level of clarity I had not allowed myself before. Every canceled brunch, every late night, every small moment that had felt off but easy to dismiss. Now they all had a place to land. Around 3 in the morning, I stopped trying to make sense of the past. Instead, I started thinking about what came next. Not emotionally, practically. I began making a list in my head. 11 years of marriage. A house we bought together 6 years ago, both names on the deed. A joint savings account with just over $70,000 in it. Money we had been setting aside for renovations we would never do now. My retirement account. His business. Ethan owned a mid-sized landscaping company. I was not involved day to day, but in the early years when things were unstable I had signed documents, backed loans, taken on risk without thinking twice. My name was tied to more than I had fully considered. That realization did something important. It shifted the situation from emotional betrayal to structural reality. By the time the sun came up, I had made a decision. I was not going to react. I was going to respond. At 6 in the morning, I got out of bed, went downstairs, and made coffee like I always did. The routine felt strange but grounding at the same time. Then I opened my laptop. The first thing I did was transfer money. Half of what was in our joint account into my personal account. Not everything. Not out of fear. Out of balance. It was not impulsive. It was not revenge. It was protection. My hands were steady as I typed in the amount. That surprised me. I had expected fear, hesitation, something dramatic. Instead, I felt focused. Fear was there, of course, but it was quiet, controlled, useful. Because fear, when you listen to it correctly, does not paralyze you. Tells you what matters. And what mattered in that moment was making sure I did not lose more than I already had. By 8:30, Ethan came downstairs. He looked like someone who had not slept. His movements were careful, his voice measured. "We should talk," he said. "We will," I replied. "With lawyers present." He opened his mouth, then closed it. Nodded once. That was the end of that conversation. After he left the house, I sat back down at my laptop and started searching for a divorce attorney. Not just any attorney. Someone who understood complex assets. Someone who knew how to handle a situation where emotion could not be allowed to lead. Because by then I understood something clearly. This was no longer just about what they had done. It was about what I was going to do next. The discovery did not happen in a dramatic moment. There was no confrontation, no sudden reveal, no message that exposed everything at once. It happened on a quiet Saturday afternoon, in the middle of something completely ordinary. I was in Ethan's home office going through the house room by room, documenting assets for my attorney, furniture, electronics, anything of value that might matter later. It was tedious work, but it gave me something to focus on, something that felt controlled. The office closet was the last thing on my list. I pulled down a cardboard box from the top shelf, expecting old paperwork, tax returns, receipts, the kind of things people keep out of habit more than necessity. First, that is exactly what I found. Folders, envelopes, documents from years ago that no longer meant much. Then, underneath all of it, there was something else. A smaller box. It was not labeled, not sealed, just placed there like it belonged but was not meant to be looked at too closely. I opened it. Inside were receipts, dozens of them, restaurant bills, hotel bookings, spa reservations, jewelry purchases. They were not local. Michigan, Wisconsin, Arizona. Trips Ethan had told me were work-related. Conferences, client meetings, industry events. I picked one up at random. A resort in Sedona. The date was from 3 years ago. I remembered that weekend clearly. He had told me he would be in Cincinnati for a landscaping conference. I kept going. Every receipt told the same story. Not business. Not work. Something personal. Consistent. Planned. Then I found the photographs. Printed. Not digital. That detail mattered more than I expected. It meant this was not just convenience. It was something he had chosen to preserve. Ethan and Lily at a vineyard. Ethan and Lily on a beach. Ethan and Lily sitting across from each other at a restaurant, leaning in slightly, the kind of posture people fall into when they no longer feel the need to perform affection. It was not casual. It was a relationship. 5 years, documented in a box he had hidden just well enough to avoid discovery, but not well enough to erase it. For a moment I just stood there. Not crying. Not shaking. Still. Then I took out my phone and began photographing everything. Every receipt. Every image. Every detail that could not be argued away later. I did not rush. I made sure each photo was clear, readable, complete. When I was finished, I placed everything back exactly as I had found it. Same order. Same position. Same angle on the shelf. If he ever checked, nothing would look disturbed. That mattered. Because this was no longer about what I knew. It was about what I could prove. I stepped out of the office, closed the door behind me, and stood in the hallway for a moment. Then I called my attorney. I found something, I said. There was a pause on the other end. How much, she asked. I looked back at the closed office door. Enough, I said. More than enough. Once my attorney, Patricia Cole, reviewed what I had found, everything began to move faster. Not emotionally. Logistically. She did not react with shock or outrage. She reacted with precision. This is useful, she said, as she flipped through the printed copies I had brought in. But we need to be careful about how we use it. She explained that the affair itself would not determine the outcome of the divorce. Texas, like many states, does not divide assets based on betrayal alone. But money changes things. If Ethan had used marital funds or business resources to support that relationship, that was no longer just personal. It was financial misconduct. And financial misconduct could be measured. That was where the strategy shifted. Patricia brought in a forensic accountant named Daniel Reeves. Quiet, methodical, the kind of person who spoke in numbers more comfortably than words. His job was simple in theory. Track where the money went. Match dates, locations, transactions. Connect what I had found in that box to what existed in Ethan's business records. In practice, it was meticulous work. Over the next 10 days, Daniel went through years of financial data. Expense reports. Company accounts. Credit card statements. What he found confirmed what we suspected. Approximately $25,000 had been routed through Ethan's company to cover personal expenses tied directly to those trips. Hotels. Flights. Dining. Gifts. Not enough to bankrupt anyone. But more than enough to matter. More importantly, it was documented. Traceable. Clean in a way that made it hard to explain away. While that process was unfolding, Ethan and Lily began to react. Lily called me first. Her voice was controlled, almost calm, but there was tension underneath it. "You need to stop this," she said. "Stop what?" I asked. "You know what? You are taking this too far. There are other people involved. Employees. Business partners. You are going to hurt people who have nothing to do with this." It was a smart angle. Not emotional. Strategic. She was trying to shift the focus away from what they had done and onto what I might do to others. I leaned against the kitchen counter as she spoke, listening carefully. "I am asking for a fair settlement," I said. "Nothing more." "You are trying to destroy him," she replied, sharper now. "No," I said. "I am making sure I am not the one who gets destroyed." There was a pause. Then her tone changed. "You are not as perfect as you think," she said. "There are things about you too. Things that will not look good if this goes further." There it was. The shift from persuasion to threat. I had been expecting it. I did not raise my voice. I did not argue. "Lily," I said evenly, "if you want to have this conversation, we can do it with attorneys present. Otherwise, I suggest you think very carefully about what you say next." Silence. Then she exhaled, frustrated. "You are being vindictive." "No," I said. "I am being precise." I ended the call. Later that evening, Ethan tried a different approach. Text messages. First, they were reasonable. He wanted to talk, to explain, to work something out. Then they shifted. He mentioned things I might not want made public. Vague references. Nothing specific. Just enough to suggest leverage. I forwarded every message to Patricia. Her response was immediate. "Good," she said. "Keep everything." Because at that point the pattern was clear. They were not trying to fix what they had broken. They were trying to control how much it would cost them. The confrontation happened on a Wednesday evening in mid-February. I had just finished cleaning up dinner when the doorbell rang. I was not expecting anyone. When I looked through the window, I saw both of them standing there. Ethan and Lily. Together. For a moment, I considered not opening the door. But then I realized something important. It is easier to understand people when they believe they still have access to you. So I opened it. Lily spoke first. That did not surprise me. "Can we come in?" she asked. "Just 5 minutes." Her voice was calm, almost warm, like we were about to have a normal conversation. We were not. I stepped aside and let them in. We sat in the living room. I took the chair. They sat on the couch, close enough that the space between them said everything they were not saying out loud. Lily started carefully. "I know you are angry," she said. "And you have every right to be." I said nothing. "But this does not have to destroy everything," she continued. "We are still family. Mom is already upset. She does not know the details, but she knows something is wrong." There it was. Family. Guilt wrapped in concern. I looked at her for a moment before speaking. "What exactly do you think we still have?" I asked. She hesitated just briefly. "We have history," she said. "We have shared family. We have a relationship that does not have to end like this." I nodded slightly. "You sat across from me for 5 years," I said. "You listened to me talk about my marriage. You let me question what was wrong, what I was missing. And you knew the entire time." Her expression tightened. "So when you say we have something," I continued, "I need you to be specific." She did not answer. Ethan leaned forward instead. "We can figure this out," he said. "There is no reason to drag everything through court. Think about what that does to the business, to the people who work there." I almost smiled. He was still trying to protect everything except the truth. "If you are concerned about your business," I said, "you should have been more careful with how you used it." His jaw tightened. "That is being taken out of context," he said. I held his gaze. "Then you can explain the context in court." That was when Lily lost control. The calm tone disappeared. "You are going to regret this," she said sharply. "You think you know everything, but you do not." The words hung in the air. For a second, I felt something shift inside me. Not fear exactly, just awareness. Uncertainty can sound like power when it is delivered the right way. But I had already seen enough. I stood up and walked to the door. "We are done here," I said. Neither of them moved immediately. Then Ethan stood. Lily followed. As she walked past me, she did not look at me. That told me more than anything she could have said. They had run out of arguments. All they had left were reactions. and reactions were not going to change anything. The mediation was scheduled for late March, in a conference room in downtown Austin. Neutral space. Neutral walls. The kind of place designed to strip emotion out of situations that were built on it. Patricia and I arrived early. She set her files on the table with quiet precision, reviewing documents one last time. I sat beside her, calm in a way that felt different from before. Not forced. Not practiced. Settled. Ethan arrived with his attorney a few minutes later. He did not look at me right away. When he did, it was brief. Measured. Like eye contact itself carried weight now. Lily came shortly after, accompanied by her own lawyer. Seeing all of us in the same room felt surreal. Not because of the tension, but because of how ordinary it looked from the outside. Just people sitting at a table, papers in front of them, discussing numbers. That is how things like this end. Not with shouting. With documentation. The mediator opened the session with a standard explanation. The goal was resolution, not blame. Agreement, not punishment. Ethan's attorney spoke first. He presented an updated offer. More money. Better terms. Framed as reasonable. Generous even. I listened without interrupting. Because I already knew what mattered was not what he said. It was what he did not know we had. When he finished, Patricia waited a moment. Then she slid a document across the table. The full forensic report. 40 pages of analysis. Dates. Transactions. Patterns that were too consistent to dismiss. The room shifted. Ethan's attorney read quickly at first, then more slowly. Lily glanced at her lawyer, who had gone very still. No one spoke for several seconds. Then the questions began. The mediator asked about specific transactions. Specific dates. Trips that had been labeled as business expenses but clearly were not. Ethan's attorney tried to respond. To reframe. To suggest context that might soften the impact. But numbers are difficult to argue with when they are organized properly. Then came the moment that changed everything. The mediator asked about a trip to Sedona 3 years earlier. Lily answered before her attorney could stop her. That was a work trip, she said. He had meetings. The room went quiet. The mediator looked at her carefully. Were you aware of that trip at the time, she asked. Lily hesitated. Just long enough. We talked about it, she said. That was all it took. Patricia reached into her folder and placed a single photograph on the table. Printed. Clear. Undeniable. Lily standing in front of a resort in Sedona. Sunglasses. Sunlight. Relaxed. Taken the same weekend, Ethan claimed to be somewhere else entirely. The timestamp was visible. The location was tagged. No one needed to explain it. Ethan's attorney leaned back slightly, exhaling in a way that suggested calculation had just replaced strategy. A break was called. When we stepped into the hallway, Patricia handed me a glass of water. How are you feeling, she asked. Ready, I said. She nodded. Once. Good. Because they are about to settle. And they did. Not because they wanted to. Because they had to. When we returned to the room, the tone had changed completely. The language was different. No more framing. No more positioning. Just terms. The house would be transferred fully to me. No buyout required. The savings would be divided, adjusted to account for the money that had been misused. I would receive additional compensation reflecting those findings. Legal fees would be shared, with Ethan responsible for a significant portion. Every detail was negotiated, documented, agreed upon. Ethan signed without speaking. Lily did not say a word. When it was over, there was no celebration. Just silence. The kind that follows when there is nothing left to argue.